The sun rose gently over the hills of the colony world named Arden. Its light spread across green fields, silver rivers, and distant mountain peaks that glowed softly under the morning sky. Birds circled above the forest line, their calls mixing with the hum of machines from the human settlement nearby. The colony stood like a bright island in the middle of wild land, surrounded by walls of steel and watchtowers that glistened under the warm sun. Mira walked beyond the outer fence that morning, holding a small basket in her hands. She was a girl of calm eyes and steady steps, with long dark hair tied behind her, so it would not fall in front of her face. She loved walking into the open fields near the forest edge. There she often found rare plants that the doctors of the colony used for medicine. She was young, but she had courage and patience. She knew which plants could heal wounds and which ones could help fevers. The elders trusted her to bring them back safely. The air was peaceful and the grass swayed gently under the morning wind. Mira felt calm as she bent down to pick a group of glowing leaves that caught the light like little stars. She placed them carefully into her basket and looked up at the sky. The colony behind her seemed safe. She could hear faint noises of engines from the main gate where guards changed shifts. Everything appeared quiet, almost too quiet for a world that often held hidden dangers. As she walked further toward the forest, Mira felt the earth under her feet begin to tremble. At first, she thought it was only her imagination, but then the sound grew stronger. It was not the sound of machines. It was deeper, older, heavier. She stopped, holding her breath, and looked around. The birds that had circled above suddenly scattered, flying away in a rush. Their cries filled the sky. The ground shook again, and a strong wind swept across the field, carrying with it the scent of smoke and ash. Mira turned toward the forest, and her heart almost stopped. Out of the shadows of the trees, a massive figure moved. At first it seemed like a mountain shifting, but then its pale body caught the sun, shining white like polished bone. 2 wings stretched wide, larger than any building in the colony. Its eyes were like burning red suns, and its mouth opened to release a roar that shook the very sky. It was the albino dragon. This dragon was unlike the dark-scaled beast that the hunters sometimes spotted in the distance. It was larger, more powerful, and more terrifying than anything Mira had ever seen. Its scales gleamed like ivory, each one as strong as metal. Its claws dug deep into the soil as it stepped forward, crushing rocks under its weight. The roar that left its throat was filled with rage and hunger, a sound so sharp that it made Mira cover her ears. For a moment, Mira stood frozen, unable to move. She had heard stories of dragons told by her father, Aaron, and the other elders. They said dragons had once ruled this planet before humans built their colonies. But the albino dragon was more than just a beast. The stories claimed it was bound to the dragon warlords, the leaders of the dragon clans who held ancient power. Mira never believed she would see such a creature with her own eyes. The dragon's gaze locked on her. Its red eyes narrowed and its wings stretched again. Then it lowered its head, smoke rising from its nostrils. The earth shook as it moved closer, each step heavy like thunder. Mira's basket fell from her hands. She turned and ran toward the colony fence, her heart pounding louder than the dragon's roar. Her feet carried her fast across the field, but the dragon's wings beat once, twice, sending strong winds that almost threw her to the ground. The sound was deafening. Dust and grass flew into the air as the beast lifted its body slightly, moving faster than she thought possible. She looked back once and saw the dragon's claws strike the ground where she had stood seconds before. The earth split and rocks flew into the air. She screamed but did not stop running. Ahead, the colony walls stood tall, but they felt far away, too far for her small legs against such a giant. Inside the colony, the sirens began to wail. The guards on the wall shouted, their voices filled with alarm. Lights flashed red across the gates, and defense drones rose into the air. The people inside looked out in fear as the white dragon moved closer to their home. Children were rushed inside, and workers dropped their tools to hide in shelters. The dragon opened its mouth, and fire spilled out. It was not normal fire. It was bright, almost white, as if the flames were pure heat. The grass turned to ash instantly where the fire touched. Mira felt the heat on her back as she ran, sweat covering her face. She reached a group of rocks near the field and threw herself behind them. The dragon's flame swept past, scorching the ground. The rocks shook under the force, but they shielded her. She gasped for breath, her body trembling. For a moment, she dared to look out from behind the stones. The colony soldiers had gathered their weapons and fired energy bolts at the dragon. Bright beams struck its white scales, but they bounced off without leaving a mark. The beast raised its wings again, roaring at the tiny humans below. With one sweep of its tail, it struck down a line of drones that had flown too close. The machines fell like broken toys, sparks flying. Mira's eyes widened as she noticed something strange. On the chest of the dragon, just above its heart, she saw glowing marks. They were not natural. They looked like symbols burned into its skin, shining with faint red light. They pulsed in rhythm with the dragon's roar, as if feeding it strength. She realized these marks were connected to something greater. This dragon was not just an animal. It was bound to a master. She pressed herself against the stone, whispering to herself to stay calm. Her mind raced. If the marks were tied to a master, then somewhere close by there had to be someone who controlled the dragon's rage. The stories spoke of the dragon warlords, beings who commanded dragons like generals commanded armies. If this was true, then danger was greater than she imagined. The colony defenders shouted orders, their voices echoing. The main gates began to close, but Mira was still outside. She tried to rise, but the dragon's shadow fell over her again. It moved its head low, sniffing the ground. Smoke curled from its mouth as its hot breath swept across her hiding place. She knew she could not stay there forever. She had to move, had to think of something. But her legs felt heavy and her mind filled with fear. For the first time, Mira wondered if this was the end, not just for her, but for the entire colony. The dragon roared once more, louder than before. The sound carried far across the hills and mountains. In that roar, Mira thought she heard not only rage but also command, as if the beast was calling for its master. And somewhere in the distance, deep in the forest, an answer was coming. The sky above darkened as the dragon spread its wings wide, blocking the sun. The colony behind Mira stood ready with defenses, but fear was heavy in every heart. The battle for their survival had only just begun. The albino dragon stood tall in the field, its wings casting a great shadow over the land. Its roar had shaken the colony walls, and its fire had burned the grass black. The soldiers inside the colony did their best to hold their ground, but fear hung heavy in the air. This was not just another beast from the wildlands. This was something greater, something far more dangerous. Mira remained hidden behind the rocks, her heart beating fast. She wanted to run to the gates, but the dragon's eyes kept scanning the field. Every time it moved its head, she froze in place. The glowing marks on its chest pulsed again, and she thought she saw its body grow stronger with each pulse. She remembered the old stories of her father, Aaron. He often spoke about dragons that were tied to the dragon warlords, leaders who used strange powers to command these beasts. Could this be one of those dragons? The soldiers on the walls fired their rifles. Blue beams of light struck the dragon again and again, but the creature did not fall. It moved with power, swinging its tail into the ground. The shockwave knocked several drones out of the air. The soldiers shouted, their voices filled with worry, but still they tried to hold the line. Mira looked toward the colony gates. They were closing to protect the people inside, but that meant she would be trapped outside with the beast. She had to move before the gates shut completely. Gathering her courage, she held her breath and sprinted across the open ground. The dragon's head turned sharply, its red eyes locking on her again. The ground shook as the beast slammed its claw down near her. Dirt flew into the air, and the shock nearly knocked her off her feet. She stumbled, but she did not stop. The gates were almost closed, only a narrow gap left. She ran as fast as her legs could carry her. From the wall, a soldier shouted, "Open the gate! Let her through." The heavy doors paused, then began to open wider again. Mira rushed forward, her chest burning from the run. Behind her, the dragon's wings beat strongly, and the wind almost pushed her into the ground. She dived through the opening just as the dragon's claw scraped against the metal gate, leaving a deep mark. The doors slammed shut and the soldiers locked them tight. Inside the colony, people rushed toward her. Some were shouting, others pulling her to safety. Mira lay on the ground, gasping for air, her face pale but her eyes wide with fear. Aaron, her father, pushed through the crowd to reach her. He held her shoulders and checked if she was hurt. She shook her head and whispered, "It is not just a dragon. It has marks." I saw them glowing on its chest. Aaron's face grew grim. He knew what those marks meant. Long ago, he had studied old records about dragons and their masters. The marks were signs of binding, proof that the beast was tied to a dragon warlord. If this dragon was here, then the warlord would not be far behind. The alarm sirens echoed again as the albino dragon slammed its tail against the colony walls. The steel shook and dust fell from the watchtowers. Soldiers braced themselves, holding their rifles tightly. The commander of the colony forces shouted orders, sending drones into the air and placing heavy cannons along the walls. The dragon roared again and breathed fire against the gates. The metal glowed red from the heat, but it held firm. The people inside cried out, fearing the walls would not last. Yet the defenders stood strong, refusing to let panic take over. Mira rose to her feet, still shaken. She looked at her father and asked, "Can we stop it?" Aaron's eyes were filled with worry. "Not with simple weapons. This dragon is no wild beast. It is the weapon of a warlord. If the warlord is near, he will come for us soon." The commander stepped closer. "What do you mean?" he demanded. Aaron answered calmly, though his voice carried weight. "The glowing marks are ancient symbols. They are carved into the beast through blood and fire. Only a dragon warlord can control such power. If the beast is here, its master will come to claim our world." The soldiers exchanged uneasy glances. The commander clenched his fists but stood firm. "Then we must hold the walls. We cannot let the people fall into despair." Outside, the albino dragon struck again. This time the wall bent slightly under its force. Cracks formed in the ground around its claws. The cannons on the towers fired together, sending large blasts of energy at its wings and chest. The air filled with smoke and light. For a moment, people dared to hope. But when the smoke cleared, the dragon still stood tall, only angrier than before. Its glowing chest marks flared brighter. The beast lifted its wings high and smashed them down. The shockwave shook the colony so hard that many people fell to the ground. Windows shattered and dust filled the air. The defenders struggled to stay standing, but their eyes showed fear. Mira clenched her fists. She was frightened, but inside her heart burned a small flame of courage. She had seen the marks clearly. If they were the key to the dragon's strength, then maybe they were also the key to its weakness. Aaron placed a hand on her shoulder. "Do not lose hope. Sometimes knowledge is sharper than any blade. We must learn how to fight this beast." At that moment, the sky grew darker. Clouds rolled in, though no storm was near. A cold wind blew across the land. From the forest beyond the dragon, a deep sound rose, not like any animal, but like a chant carried on the wind. The dragon lifted its head and roared in answer. The defenders on the walls looked out in fear. In the distance, through the mist of the forest, a shape appeared. A rider on another dragon. His armor shone black, and his presence filled the land with dread. This was the dragon warlord Kale. He had come at last. The people inside the colony gasped, their hope fading. They were already struggling against one dragon, and now a warlord with his own beast was here. The albino dragon roared again, its voice filled with pride at its master's arrival. The colony stood on the edge of despair. Mira stared through the cracks of the wall, her eyes fixed on the dark figure riding toward them. She whispered, "The true battle is only beginning." The dark rider approached slowly, yet his presence made the land tremble as though mountains themselves were moving. The sky grew heavier with every beat of the black dragon's wings. Its scales gleamed like polished stone, and its eyes burned with a cruel light. The people on the colony walls could hardly breathe. It was not only the beast that frightened them, but the figure that sat with pride upon its back. Kale, the dragon warlord, rode forward with calm power. His armor was dark as night, marked with strange runes that glowed faintly red. His face was hidden behind a mask shaped like a dragon's skull. From his very presence, it was clear that he was no ordinary man. He was master of the albino dragon that had already shaken their walls. The albino dragon raised its head high as if greeting its master. It gave a mighty roar that shook the ground. The black dragon answered with a roar of its own, and the air seemed to crack with the sound. Together they stood, two monsters bound to one master, and their shadows covered the colony like a dark storm. Inside the walls, the commander shouted for every soldier to prepare. The cannons pointed toward the warlord, but even the bravest men felt doubt. Their weapons had already failed to harm the albino dragon. Now they faced not one but two beasts, guided by a master whose power was still unknown. Mira stood close to her father, Aaron. Her heart raced, yet her eyes stayed fixed on Kale. She whispered, "That is him, the one who commands the dragon." Aaron nodded slowly, his face pale. "Yes, that is Kale. I read of him long ago in the old records. He is not only a warrior but also a wielder of forbidden power. The runes on his armor bind him to his beasts. He feeds them strength, and in return, they obey him without question." The commander stepped closer, his voice sharp with worry. "Then how do we fight him? We can hardly hold against the white beast, and now he brings another." Aaron's gaze was steady, though his voice was quiet. There may be a way. His power is not endless. The marks on the albino dragon show its bond to him. If that bond can be broken, the beast may fall. Mira's thoughts rushed. She remembered how the glowing marks on the dragon's chest pulsed each time it roared. Perhaps that was the key. If those marks were destroyed, the creature might lose its strength. But how could they strike such a place when even cannons failed to scratch its scales? Outside, Cale raised his hand. His voice, deep and commanding, carried across the land, though he spoke as if whispering. Humans of Arden, your time is at an end. Surrender your colony, or I will tear down your walls and burn your fields until nothing remains. The words struck like blades into every heart. Some people cried, others trembled, and even soldiers gripped their rifles with shaking hands. The colony had worked for years to build a safe home on this wild world. Now, in a single day, all of it stood on the edge of ruin. The commander climbed the wall and shouted back with firm voice. This colony belongs to humanity. We will not surrender. Kyle tilted his head slightly as if amused. Brave words, but your weapons are nothing before me. You cannot stop what is coming. He lifted his hand and the albino dragon roared in answer. It struck the wall again, cracking the stone and steel. Dust fell as people screamed. Mira clenched her fists. She could not bear to see her people crushed. Her mind searched for an answer. The pulse lance her father had once spoken of came to her thoughts. It was an old human weapon, locked away in the vaults of the colony. It was said to be built to pierce the energy shields of ancient enemies. Could it work against the dragon's marks? She did not know, but it was a chance. She tugged at her father's sleeve. The pulse lance, you told me about it. We must find it. Aaron's eyes widened, then narrowed with resolve. Yes, it may be the only hope. But it is hidden deep in the vaults beneath the colony. The commander sealed it long ago, fearing it too dangerous to use. The commander overheard and turned to them sharply. What weapon do you speak of? Aaron explained quickly. The pulse lance, a relic from the early days of human wars. It fires pure energy that can pierce even the strongest shields. If anything can strike the Warlord's beast, it is this weapon. The commander hesitated, torn between fear of the old weapon and the clear danger before them. At last he nodded. Then we must take the chance. Find it and fast. Mira and Aaron rushed toward the inner colony, guided by two soldiers who knew the path to the vaults. As they ran, the ground shook again from the dragon's attacks. The sound of fire and screams echoed behind them. The walls were strong, but they would not last forever. The vault entrance was hidden beneath the command building. Heavy doors guarded it, and only the commander's code could open them. One of the soldiers carried the code, and with shaking hands he pressed the panel. The doors opened with a low groan, revealing a dark stairway leading deep underground. They hurried down into the cool air of the vault. Lights flickered on as they passed, revealing rows of old crates and sealed cases. Dust lay heavy on everything, proof that no one had come here for years. At the far end of the chamber stood a tall container marked with warning signs. The soldiers unlocked it, and there it was, the pulse lance. It was longer than a rifle, glowing faintly blue even while dormant. Its shape was sleek, built for precision. Mira felt her breath catch as she saw it. It looked alive, as though waiting for the moment to be used. Aaron placed his hand gently on it. This is our chance. With this, perhaps we can strike the beast where it is weak. One of the soldiers lifted it carefully and handed it to Mira. It was heavy, but she held it firmly. The blue light inside it grew brighter, sensing her touch. She felt warmth flow through her arms as if the weapon itself recognized her courage. They rushed back toward the surface. Above, the sounds of battle grew louder. The walls shook with each strike of the dragon. The cries of soldiers and the roar of beasts filled the air. The black dragon circled above, its shadow sweeping over the colony. When Mira emerged with the pulse lance, the soldiers on the wall looked at her with surprise and hope. The commander's eyes widened. You found it. Then use it well. Aim for the marks. They are the key. Mira climbed the nearest tower, her heart racing. She could see the albino dragon clearly now. Its chest glowed with the strange red symbols. Each pulse made it stronger, and each roar carried the Warlord's command. She raised the pulse lance, the weapon humming with power. Cale noticed her. His masked face turned toward the tower, and his voice echoed cold across the air. So the humans bring out their old toys. Do you think you can challenge me with scraps of the past? Mira did not answer. She steadied her hands, took a deep breath, and aimed. The blue energy within the pulse lance swirled, ready to be released. All around her, the colony held its breath. Then she fired. A beam of pure light burst from the weapon, brighter than any cannon. It flew across the field and struck the albino dragon directly on its chest. The red marks flared as the beam pierced them. The dragon roared in pain, louder than before, shaking the air with fury. Its wings flailed and it stumbled back, crashing against the ground. The people on the walls gasped. For the first time, the beast had been wounded. Hope lit their faces, but Cale did not flinch. His dark voice rang out, filled with anger. "You dare!" He raised his hand and power flowed from him into the black dragon. Its body glowed and its eyes burned brighter. The warlord was not finished. The true battle was only beginning. Mira lowered the pulse lance, her arms trembling. She had struck once, but it was not enough. She knew she would have to face not just the albino dragon, but also the warlord himself. And she was ready. The blast from the pulse lance echoed across the land like thunder. The beam had struck true, hitting the glowing marks on the albino dragon's chest. The beast had stumbled back, roaring in pain, and the ground shook as its giant body crashed against the field. For the first time since the attack began, the defenders on the wall saw hope. Cheers broke out, but they were short and uncertain. Everyone knew the fight was far from over. The albino dragon rose again, its body shaking. The red marks on its chest still glowed, though less brightly than before. Smoke rose from the wound and its eyes burned with rage. It let out another roar, one that carried both pain and fury, shaking every heart within the colony. Cale, the dragon warlord, raised his hand from the back of the black dragon. His voice carried like a storm. "Impressive. But one strike will not save you. You challenge me, and for that you will be crushed." The black dragon descended, circling above the colony. Its wings beat the air so strongly that the towers swayed and dust flew into the sky. The soldiers raised their weapons, but their shots barely reached the beast as it flew high. Mira stood on the tower, holding the pulse lance tightly. Her arms trembled from the weapon's power, but her eyes stayed fixed on the albino dragon below. She had heard it once. She had to do it again. She had to finish what she had started. Her father, Aaron, called up from the ground. "Mira, be careful. The weapon drains strength with every shot. You cannot fire it endlessly." She nodded, understanding. The pulse lance was powerful, but it demanded focus and energy from its user. She could feel it pulling at her, testing her resolve. She would have to aim carefully and strike at the right moment. The commander shouted orders, sending more drones into the air. The machines swarmed the black dragon, trying to distract it. Explosions lit the sky as the drones fired beams of light, but the dragon's scales reflected them. With a sweep of its tail, the black dragon destroyed a cluster of drones at once. Pieces of metal rained down like falling stars. The albino dragon charged the wall again. Its claws struck the steel gates, bending them inward. Sparks flew, and the people inside cried out in fear. Soldiers fired from every angle, but their shots only angered the beast further. Mira steadied her weapon. She aimed again at the glowing marks. The dragon moved wildly now, its body shaking with pain and rage, making it harder to aim. She waited, her breath slow and steady, ignoring the chaos around her. At last, the beast lifted its chest high as it roared. Mira fired. The beam cut through the air, striking the marks again. The dragon screamed louder than before and stumbled backward. Its wings flapped desperately, sending gusts of wind across the field. The ground cracked beneath its weight as it fell once more. This time its chest burned brighter, the marks breaking apart like shattered glass. The people on the wall shouted with joy. For a moment, victory seemed close. But Cale's dark laughter filled the air. He raised his hands and red energy flowed from his body into the albino dragon. The marks glowed again, sealing themselves, though not fully. The beast rose, weaker but still standing. Cale's voice thundered. "Did you think it would be so easy? My power binds this creature. While I live, it will not fall." Mira's eyes narrowed. She understood the truth. The dragon would never die while Cale fed its strength. The only way to end this was to face the warlord himself. The commander realized the same. He shouted, "Our target is not just the beast, it is the master. All fire on the warlord." Cannons and rifles turned toward Cale. Beams of energy filled the sky, streaking toward the black dragon and its rider. But Cale raised one hand and a dark shield formed around him. The beam struck the shield and vanished like sparks in the wind. The black dragon dove low, sweeping across the walls. Its claws tore through a tower, sending stones and soldiers crashing down. Flames poured from its mouth, striking the colony yard. People screamed as the ground burned. The defenders fought bravely, but despair returned like a heavy storm. Mira gritted her teeth. She would not allow fear to win. She climbed higher on the tower, standing in the open. She raised the pulse lance, aiming not at the albino dragon this time, but at the warlord himself. Cale noticed. He turned his masked face toward her, his voice cold. "You dare aim at me, child?" She did not answer. She focused, the weapon humming in her hands. Blue light swirled within it, gathering strength. She aimed at the warlord's chest, where his runes glowed faintly. If she could strike there, perhaps his bond to the dragons would break. She fired. The beam shot forward, bright and fast. Cale's shield rose again, but the pulse lance cut into it, shaking it with force. The warlord growled as cracks formed in the shield. For the first time, his calm expression broke. He was forced to retreat, pulling the black dragon higher into the air. The people on the wall shouted with hope. The warlord was not untouchable after all. Cale's voice roared with fury. "Enough. You will learn the cost of defiance." He raised both hands, and energy surged from him into the albino dragon. The beast's eyes glowed brighter, and its body swelled with power. It roared so loudly that the sky itself seemed to tremble. Flames poured from its mouth, striking the gates with such force that the steel bent inward and cracks spread across the walls. The defenders braced themselves. The walls would not last much longer. The colony was moments away from falling. Mira knew what had to be done. She shouted to the commander, "Open the gates. Let it come closer. I need a clear shot." The commander looked at her in shock. "That is madness. If we open the gates, it will destroy everything." Aaron's voice rose, steady and strong. "Trust her. She has already heard it twice. If she says she can finish it, then give her the chance." The commander hesitated, then gave the order. The great gates, already damaged, groaned as they began to open. The albino dragon charged, its wings spreading wide. It rushed toward the opening, fire spilling from its mouth. Mira stood ready on the tower, her weapon glowing brighter than ever. She aimed at the dragon's chest, where the marks pulsed with Cale's power. Her breath slowed. Her hands were steady. She pulled the trigger. The beam of light exploded from the pulse lance, brighter and stronger than before. It struck the marks directly. This time the glow shattered completely. The red symbols broke apart, and the albino dragon let out a roar that turned into a scream of pain. Its wings flailed wildly as its body crashed into the ground before the gate. Dust and fire filled the air. The people shouted with joy, but the battle was not over. Cale roared in anger, his voice shaking the very air. The bond between him and the albino dragon was broken. The beast lay on the ground, its body weak and trembling. But Cale was not defeated. His black dragon dove, and his eyes burned with rage. Mira lowered the pulse lance, her strength nearly gone. She had given everything for that final shot. Her body trembled, but her spirit did not break. She looked up at the warlord, her eyes filled with defiance. The commander shouted to the soldiers, "Stand ready. The albino dragon is down, but the warlord is coming. This is our chance. Together we can fight." The colony, though battered and shaken, rose once more. Soldiers, drones, and even civilians stood tall. Their courage burned bright in the face of the storm. The warlord Cale descended with fury, but the people were no longer filled with fear. They had seen that the dragons could bleed. They had seen that courage and unity could strike even the strongest foe. The true battle between humanity and the dragon warlord was about to begin. The air was heavy with smoke, fire, and silence. The duel had ended, and the ground still shook from the power that was unleashed. Dust floated around the battlefield where the dragon warlord had fallen. His great armored body lay still, his wings broken, his tail limp across the ruined stones. For a moment, neither humans nor dragons made a sound. The world itself seemed to wait, holding its breath. Rian stood tall with his spear in hand, his chest rising and falling with deep breaths. Blood dripped from his arms, but his grip was strong. Beside him, Mira held the glowing device that had carried strange ancient power. She was smaller than anyone else there, yet her courage filled the open field. The dragons, gathered in the distance, lowered their heads. They had watched their strongest leader fight, roar, and burn the earth, yet he was the one who lay defeated. The albino dragon that had attacked Mira earlier was still alive but beaten. It dragged its body away, its red eyes wide with fear for the first time. Humans who had hidden inside broken walls and fallen bunkers began to come out. They stared in disbelief. The warlord who had terrorized planets was dead at the hands of humans. Ryan knew the fight was not truly over. The warlord's army still stood, rows of dragons larger than houses, their scales glowing under the smoke-lit sky. If they chose to attack now, the humans would fall. Ryan turned to them and raised the spear. His voice was loud and clear. Your warlord is dead. His power is broken. You can fight us or you can leave. But know this, humans do not kneel. We do not bow. Not today, not ever. Mira lifted the device and it shone brighter, a beam cutting through the dust. The dragons shifted uneasily. Some growled low, but none advanced. They looked at the headless body of their warlord, and then at the humans standing unshaken. With slow steps, Ryan walked forward. He pressed his foot on the warlord's chest, raised his spear, and with one final strike, cut clean through the thick, scaled neck. The head rolled down, heavy as a boulder, eyes frozen wide. The ground thundered as it stopped near the broken gate of the colony. The sight sent a chill through both armies. The head of the dragon warlord lay in the dirt, no longer a symbol of fear, but of defeat. Ryan turned to the humans. Raise it, he said. Strong hands came forward. Farmers, fighters, and elders lifted the head with chains and ropes. With effort, they hung it high upon the broken gate where once dragons had flown in to burn their homes. Now the gate bore the head of their enemy, the proof that the age of fear was ending. A cry rose from the humans, not of fear but of triumph. Their voices echoed through the valley, shaking even the strongest dragon hearts. Children shouted. Elders wept. Fighters lifted their weapons to the sky. The dragons, faced with the weight of the moment, began to retreat. One by one, wings spread wide and they flew into the clouds. Some turned back once, but none dared challenge the humans again. The albino dragon, broken and wounded, gave a final glance at Mira before fleeing into the horizon. The battlefield was theirs. Night fell. Fires burned in the colony, not from destruction but from celebration. Humans gathered around, retelling what they had seen. Mira faced the albino dragon, some said. Re-instruct the warlord down, others told. The story spread like fire in dry grass, growing stronger with every voice. Inside the hall of stone, now half ruined, Ryan sat with Mira. Leaders and elders surrounded them. The head of the warlord still hung outside, visible through the cracks in the wall. One elder leaned forward. Today we have won more than a battle. We have shown the galaxy that humans are not prey. We are not weak. We are warriors, another spoke. The dragons will return one day. They will not forget. But now they will think twice before bringing war to our gates. Mira looked down at the device in her hand. Its glow had dimmed, but warmth still pulsed from it. She whispered, This was the reason I lived when the dragon first attacked, but I think it is more than just a tool. It feels like it was waiting for us. For this day, Ryan placed a hand on her shoulder. Whatever it is, it saved us. But remember, Mira, it was not only the device. It was you. You stood when others would run. You proved that even a girl with nothing but courage can change the fate of all. The elders nodded and the people cheered her name outside. Mira felt her cheeks grow warm. She was only a girl from a farming family, yet tonight, she was a symbol of hope. Later, when the celebration had quieted, Ryan walked to the gate. He stood beneath the warlord's head, staring at its empty eyes. He thought of all the lives the dragon had taken, all the villages burned, all the children who had grown in fear. This single victory could not erase the scars, but it was the beginning of healing. He whispered, Your time is over. Now it is ours. Beside him, Mira appeared silent. She looked at the head, then up at the stars. Do you think the dragons will ever bow to humans? She asked. Ryan shook his head. No, they will never bow. But they will fear us now, and that is enough. The stars burned bright above them. Somewhere far away, other colonies would hear of this night. Whispers would spread. Stories would grow. The legend of the humans who killed the dragon warlord would travel across worlds. In the days that followed, the colony changed. People no longer spoke with trembling voices. Children played without hiding from shadows. Fighters trained with renewed spirit, knowing they had faced the strongest and survived. The broken walls of the colony were rebuilt, this time stronger and higher. On top of the main gate, they kept the head of the warlord as a warning. Travelers from other human settlements came to see it. They touched the chains that held it and promised they would carry this courage back to their homes. Some said the head smelled of smoke and blood. Others said it was a trophy of freedom. But for all, it was proof that dragons were not gods. Mira became a symbol among them. Wherever she went, people whispered her name. Children followed her, asking to see the device. She would smile, but she always reminded them, it was not me alone. It was all of us together. It was the spirit of humans that won. Ryan became the commander of the colony's defense. Fighters trained under him, learning the moves he had used against the Warlord. He taught them discipline, courage, and unity. A single human may fall, he told them, but together we rise higher than any dragon. Months later, on a cold night, Mira stood alone at the gate. She stared at the Warlord's head, now weathered by wind and rain. The eyes were hollow, but the memory was alive. She held the device close to her chest. It pulsed faintly again, as if answering her heart. She whispered to the stars, "This was the first victory. But it will not be the last. The age of dragons is fading. The age of humans begins." The wind carried her words into the night. Somewhere far beyond the horizon, dragons still roared, but their voices carried less power now. The fear was broken, and on the gate of the colony, the head of the dragon warlord hung as a silent witness of the day when humans rose, the day when prey became warriors, the day when hope burned brighter than fire.